Okay, hello everyone. So it is Thursday, July 18th, 2024. Final day of the RNC, and again, I'm not going to get into politics here because I don't think this is the appropriate channel for it. But seeing how this channel is about keeping your humanity or trying to keep your humanity in this time, I'm certainly going to comment on politics in its current state because this is typically the time of year where the tribes begin to form, the cults begin to form along these political lines and ideologies. And one of the things that interests me about politicians, and it seems to be a trap that people fall into, and they don't seem to understand it. So you have both of these politicians, Trump and Biden, who are now trying to throw everything they can in their campaign. Right? So you've got these campaign promises now of, well, rent is not going to be raised more than 5% each year. All medical debt is going to be wiped away. We're going to shut down the border completely. You know, all of these campaign promises, which for the most part can't even happen under the current government we have. The president, although the Supreme Court ruled essentially they can do whatever they want under official capacity, the logistics of it are still fairly difficult. But these campaign promises happen nonetheless. And especially this time of year, we throw everything we can out there. And it's interesting because that is the point of being a politician, is to campaign. And that brings up a question. If your point is to campaign and get reelected, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to fulfill your campaign promises. Because then what are you going to campaign on the next year? So you campaign on things like eliminating student debt, but if you actually do it, then we have a problem, right? Because then, heaven forbid, we would have to campaign on a new platform the next year. And so, but people just fall into this trap of listening to this campaign rhetoric and then mobilizing into their little groups and cults and all of that. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is because I had a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today. And I've said before, I am not religious. I grew up very religious, and I'm not anymore for my own reasons. But one of the things that really interested me when I was probably high school age, from a theological perspective, I grew up pretty Southern Baptist. And so, of course, you hear about the Antichrist and all of this. And so one of the theological discussions I remember having was about the fact that in the Bible, it talks about how only the Father knows when, he's coming back. And I'm not getting preachy. This isn't a religious thing, but it's just an interesting thought experiment of the reason God the Father is supposed to come back is because he's supposed to fight the Antichrist. But the devil doesn't know when God is supposedly coming back, right? And so the theological question that I had when I was younger, and a lot through college, was, does that mean that there's an Antichrist every generation? Because it seems like every generation or every other generation, especially throughout documented history, there's some figure that comes up, like Hitler or Mao or Stalin or Mussolini or any of these types of people, especially as technology makes the world more interconnected, it becomes very easy for someone to come along and have a cult-like following. And then that expands, and then we get national conflicts as a consequence. And so this question for me of, if we're going to assume the Bible is true in this regard of an Antichrist, it seems like there's a lot of credence to this notion that, well, there would have to be an Antichrist every generation. And that, people are smart enough in general to overcome and put that person out of power, whoever it is. And the interesting thing about that is that it shows how much power we give to this notion of God or the devil or good and evil, right? And that was something that when I was in church, I always thought was a cop-out. We always give the devil the blame for the evil that happens. But the reality is it's people. And that's why I bring this up. These cults of personalities, these antichrists that we want to talk about, however you want to define it, it's people's willingness at the end of the day to give up their humanity. It is people's willingness to say, look, thinking is too difficult, coming up with my own values is too difficult, and I would rather just follow someone. You tell me who to hate, I'll hate them. You tell me what values I'm supposed to have, I will have those. And this is something we see a lot in today's society, is that values are used as a way to judge, right? I have my own values that I'll hold you to, but then as soon as I fall short of those, well, I have the luxury of coming along and saying, oh, well, I was just tempted, or it was a moment of weakness, and now please forgive me. But if someone else asks for forgiveness, or if someone else deviates from these values that I have, absolutely, no tolerance for that. And so seeing these campaign rallies starting, seeing, again, this mobilization of groupthink that happens, it's predictable what's going to happen, right? Both camps are there. Their ideals are set. We will have an election coming up, and then some people will bitch about the results of the election and say it's illegitimate. Other people will, fall in line with it. Whatever happens. But until we get to this notion that the politicians we have are ultimately a representation of us, and more so a representation of our own biases at this point. It seems like we constantly now have this choice, at least I feel this way. I'm not even voting for things at this point, as much as I'm voting against things. And that is a ridiculous position to be in, right? It's a non-starter position. And it's our fault as citizens that we've allowed for this to happen. This didn't happen overnight. And again, it's a justification, it's an excuse for people to be part of a group, for people to sort of demonize the other. And we are the Antichrist in this theological thought experiment. We like to have this idea that the Antichrist is this external Hitler-esque figure, Stalin-esque figure. The reality is It's the society itself that allows for the rise of that. And it's a society that is condemned, ultimately, for that. And so just keep in mind as we continue this political season and these theatrics that are going to keep happening, don't lose yourself in a party. Try and have some ideals. Now, I know we have a two-party system, but don't let that consume your being. Don't define yourself as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. Have some ideals of your own, and then vote based on those. And ask yourself, with those ideals, are these ideals that are respectable? Are these ideals that, do they better the world, or do they simply make things worse for people that I deem inferior? And I think that's an important question to ask.